This is Suburban On Air and Cohen in the City. Here is Mike Cohen.
Oui, hello. I was in France once and I spoke my very bad French, and literally the gentleman in the cafe is like, no. I don't know where you are from, but coffee is, I understand. For the love of my ears, do not speak my language again. I hear it. I'm going to take, how you say it, the stick in the ear, not to hear you and your blah blah anymore.
Well, joining me on Cohen in the City today is stand-up comic extraordinaire Joey Elias, and noted broadcaster and of course also a great stand-up comic in his own right, Ted Bird. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Good to have you. So the reason the timing is right now is that on Wednesday, April 23rd, in the Mecca of stand-up comedy, the city of Côte Saint-Luc, where Joey Elias was reared, at the Aquatic and Community Center, there the Côte Saint-Luc Cats Committee, which I'm proud to be the founder of, and the Knights of Pythias are going to present an evening of comedy. Of course, there's going to be Joey, Ted, Alistair Tremblay-Birchall, and Charles Daglian. And it's in the Grand Salon. Brian Bloomer really working hard. Tickets $20. And in the body of this description, you'll be able to find out how you can get tickets to this show. So first off, let me ask you, Joey, Côte Saint-Luc is part of your DNA. How often, but you haven't done that many comedy shows at Côte Saint-Luc, have you, over the last few years?
No, I think I've only done maybe 2. I've done more, just talks and Q&As at the seniors luncheons and breakfasts and stuff like that than I've done stand-up. I think the last time I did stand-up in Côte Saint-Luc was maybe 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh. And what about Ted? Now, Ted, you've been sort of a West Islander, right? How often have you been to the Luc?
I honestly don't remember the last time I was in the Luc. It's been yes, I do. I went to see Dr. Benjamin back in November. Elon Benjamin is my family physician and has been for 40 years.
Oh my gosh.
When I went for my checkup last November, I said to him, I'm very concerned about you retiring, because what am I going to do for a doctor then? And he said, don't worry about it. I'm not retiring. I love what I do. And what else am I going to do? So he's in for the duration, I'm pleased to say.
Okay.
Sweet.
I'm glad.
And also, just another argument to open Cavendish right there. I mean, Ted would be here a lot more often.
That's right.
Yeah. Ted, where are you living right now? What part of?
I'm in Point Claire.
Okay, so you're in Point Claire, so it's not as far as living out in Hudson or anything like that.
Oh, God, no. No, it's not much. It's not such a schlep. I went into the city today. I had to go into the Glen, actually.
Yeah.
One of the other medical facilities in our community. And I left here at like 9:15, and I was there before 10 o'clock.
Okay. Well, we know that Ted Bird's probably a fast driver, right, Joey?
Not anymore. I don't see well enough to drive fast.
Okay. So, Joey, tell me, first off, you're a busy guy, busier guy than ever these days. You're still doing a lot of stand-up. You're at the Comedy Nest a lot. And how has your act evolved in the last, let's say, 6 months with the federal election campaign right now, and of course, Donald Trump? Has this given you a lot more material?
It could have, but you know what? I've chosen not to get involved in that, just because I think everybody's just overwhelmed with news right now. And a lot of it, shakes people up. So I've decided, if you're going to come to the comedy club, it is escapism. So let's not, and I also don't do it well. You know what I mean? I get very riled up about Ted does it well. Ted's very tuned in. I have to admit, for a news junkie, I've actually tuned out, for the last 4 or 5 months, just because it was just too much. So now, that's why there's music.
I'll tell you, my therapy in the morning when I get up and have breakfast is I watch Jimmy Kimmel's monologue because I can't get enough of people ripping apart Donald Trump. I cannot stand the man. Ted, do you have? Your Instagram is a must watch because you do such great commentaries and actually comedy on there. Just some of your one-liners. Do you do Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney, and Per Poliev material?
Not really, not in stand-up comedy. I might comment on it on social media, but I'm with Joey. I don't think people come to the comedy club to hear that kind of thing. I think they come to get away from that kind of thing. I mean, I have some jokes. If I can write a good joke, I'll use it, and I don't take sides. If I can write a good joke that'll make fun of Donald Trump, I will. If I can write a good joke that'll make fun of Mark Carney, I will. But I'm on side with Joey that I try to steer clear of that. And I know on our podcast, the Terry and Ted podcast, Terry DeMonte and I made a conscious decision not to talk about politics because, you know, you can't win, A, because we're so polarized, and B, there's so much more to talk about. People need to get, and Joey actually told me, and I don't know if I'm telling tales out of school here, Joe. Joey told me a month or so ago that he went off Twitter or X, if you prefer, because it was just too much.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I by the way, I am sort of off X as well, given the fact the person who owns it, and I've gone on Instagram, as you know, Ted. You and I have had the good fortune of seeing each other a lot more often than usual in the last few months. We cross paths, and I'm loving Instagram. I feel it's a safer place than X, and I'm posting a lot. Are you on Instagram, Joey?
I am actually. I forget my handle.
Okay, are you posting?
That's how good I am.
Not really.
You know, all I'm posting is, posters for upcoming shows that I'm on.
Okay,
that's it.
Now,
again,
Ted,
I don't want. Yeah,
Ted, you're having a lot of fun on Instagram, like I am.
Yeah, I like Instagram. I opened an Instagram account a few years ago, and then I got off because I was tired of seeing how much better everyone else's life is than mine because there's so much of that on Instagram. You know, here we are in the south of France. Here we are in Fiji. Here's my beautiful girlfriend. And I was like, come on. But then I thought, you know what? If I'm going to promote myself as a podcaster and a stand-up comic, I need to be on that platform because I think that's probably the best platform for what we do. And by we, I mean Joey and I, in terms of connecting with a younger and relevant audience. If I want to connect with the audience that's more in my demographic, I go on Facebook because that's where the boomers are. The boomers and the Gen Zs are on Facebook. The younger folks are on Instagram, I would say.
So, Joey, for the Knights of Pythias event and the Coat St. Luke Cats Committee, just so you know, it's a committee of people who rescue homeless cats, feed cats that are wild but live outdoors but need to be fed, so on and so forth. It's something pet project.
You guys never saw my act then.
Yeah, well,
I don't like cats a lot in my act.
That's fine. I hopefully be kind to them that night because they're having a bake sale to raise money for this important cause. But
not from Joey, stray cats. You're not baking those, are you?
No, Joey. No, we're not.
I knew you were going to go there, Joe.
Yeah, well, Joey.
I just did a show for the Optimist Club in Cornwall, so there's a little bit of that left over.
Joey, we don't want to have the Cats Committee boycott the show, so let's just keep it clean. But Joey, you must have some specific Coat St. Luke Jewish material reserved for this show because there's so many funny things you can do about Coat St. Luke.
There will be some stories told that more Coat St. Lukers will understand than other people. That's for sure. Some stories from my youth. I'm definitely consulting with a lawyer on one of them to see if there's a statute of limitations.
Okay.
But other than that, I mean, it's quite interesting. I never really thought of it as playing my hometown. You know what I mean? Like my hometown's always been Montreal, but just walking around the neighborhood, there's a lot of people that I know have purchased tickets, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's so much fun to see, the local boy." It's like,
Yes.
"Oh, all right."
Well,
Now there's a
you live.
little bit of extra pressure, I guess.
It's great to know that you still live in the Luke, and that's
Yeah.
important. And there's a lot of good stuff going on there. Ted, you are no longer on commercial radio. You're doing the podcast, and you're doing stand-up comedy. And are you still doing voices on commercials?
No, I haven't done any commercials in a while. I was the English voice of Renault Depot for about 15 years, and that was a pretty good run, but that ended with the pandemic.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not really, I suppose if I chase some of that work, I might get some, but I don't really need to. And the podcasting and the stand-up comedy keeps me plenty busy and pays the bills. So I'm happy with that. If something else came along, great. If not, I'm good.
The podcast. So you and Terry, now Terry, it's much easier. Terry's come back to live in Quebec, but you were managing it remotely. He was flying in. So how often does the podcast air? It's on YouTube, I know, and you have your own website.
Yeah, it airs every Wednesday. We put up a new episode Tuesday at midnight. And it's on YouTube if you want to watch it. You can also download it on Spotify or Apple. And I've learned from being in the podcasting industry now that overwhelmingly people listen to podcasts more than they watch them. Like our download numbers are way higher.
Interesting.
Than our YouTube viewing numbers. I guess that just plays into the old joke that we have faces made for radio.
Wait a minute.
Joey, speaking of radio, speaking of what Ted just said, you've been doing radio over the years. You had the comedy show on CJD. You started filling in on TSN 690. You're a big sports fan. You're a very knowledgeable sports fan. And you're really on TSN 690 a lot more these days. And what a great year with the way the Habs have been playing to be able to be on that show and with Melnick and the rest of the gang.
It's always fun filling in. And now, I'm happy to say that Sunday mornings on CJD, Jay Farrar and I doing the trivia show. So it's always fun being in the building. And I will say that there's a lot of sports fans in the city that have been very kind to me and have come up to me and just said that they enjoy me on the radio just because they think that it's different. It's a different point of view. It's just like a diehard fan that just, I'm not sitting there spewing names and numbers. It's just how I feel. And I think, just being one of those guys that goes around the city and has friends that still play sports. I just signed up for Côte St. Luc softball again after I don't know how many years. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just get the EMTs ready. The Côte St. Luc's first responders, I'm going to need some tape.
There's going to be pulled hamstrings. Oh. You're going to dislocate your elbow the first time you throw take it from me. I played baseball, not softball, baseball last summer. I played a game, and I heard.
Oh, was that the one with the guys over at Jerry Park?
It was on. We played at. We played in Kirkland. What's it called in Kirkland? My son used to play football there. It's Mark, Jewish last name guy, organizes it.
Oh, that guy. Of course, we know him. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I honestly thought Mike was going to say I knew
each other, don't you?
I know Mark, the Jewish guy, absolutely, very, very well. Ted, speaking, you mentioned your son. Your son, I think it's Sam Bird, who I remember when he was little and he went to Garden View, I'm pretty sure.
No, Sam, that was Lauren, my daughter Lauren.
Okay, Lauren. But your son is quite a sensation on the internet. Very funny. And I've been watching a lot. I follow him now on Instagram. He's a pretty funny guy.
He's a very funny guy. He's funnier than I am and better looking. One of his mother's friends once described him as a good-looking Ted.
So, Ted, I have to ask you, I remember you doing comedy for a long time. I remember years ago, I think it was you and Terry, co-hosting the Montreal show at Just for Laughs, and a few others. But you were always just naturally funny. Now you're doing a lot of stand-up, aren't you? And what kind of material do you look for?
Well, I mean, with the time that I have now, because I'm not working regularly, I've actually, and this came about thanks to Joey in part, because when Joey was doing the tour of all the legions around town to raise money for the legions, which began with saving the LaSalle Legion, I was recruited by Ken Doran to MC those shows, and I found that I was getting more and more comfortable on stage. And so now I've actually, over the last couple of years, put an effort into actually crafting material and crafting a set, whether it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. And I'm really enjoying it a lot. And I try to, and I think it's the same thing that Joey does. I don't go up and tell one-liners. I don't make up jokes. I talk about my life and I try to weave the humor into stories or into current events if I'm talking about, what's going on, which I think is important to, and Joey can speak to that. I've got material that I've been using like for years now that still gets laughs, but I also try to make a point of coming up with new material that's relevant to what's going on today and relevant to the audience. And one thing I find interesting, Joe, and I'd like to hear your take on this, I find I do better with younger crowds than I do with older crowds. I find younger people, say in their 20s, 30s, 40s, are better comedy audiences than older people in their 50s, 60s, 70s.
I think it also depends on, the city. I think Montreal, like the bigger cities are like that, but when, I play the smaller towns, I find the older folk, you can just go and say anything, like I said, I was in Williamstown. I'm bragging now, which is North Lancaster, but
Yeah.
they were just so, the average age was probably about 65, and anything went. They loved it. Anything from, somebody on the show was just doing political stuff, somebody did local stuff, and I just, I picked up on anyway, one of the signs they had in the gym of an exercise that they were teaching children that looked quite graphic. And I just did about 30 minutes on that, and they just went with everything I said. And some of it was very, apropos for the 70s.
Very interesting. Well, I think people are going to be in for a great evening of entertainment. Brian Bloomer, the organizer who eats, drinks, and sleeps this event right now. I'm sure he's called each of you about 5 times a week since you are booked. He takes this very seriously, but I think this one's going to pack it in. I really have confidence. It's going to be a great show. Thank you guys for joining me. Keep up the great work.
Thanks,
you.
Mike.
Great having Joey Elias and Ted Bird with